Senior Staff Attorney and Director of Policy at Brooklyn Defender Services. So I've foot in court and a foot outside of court as well to tell the stories of what we see on the ground as frontline practitioners every day. Our office represents about half of everyone arrested in Brooklyn, and we not only have a robust criminal defense practice, but we really have a multidisciplinary practice of family defense attorneys and immigration attorneys. We're one of 3 organizations in the city that represents folks facing deportation for free through our Knife Up practice. We also have social workers and a civil practice as well. I want to thank the New York State Assembly Committees on Codes, Health, and Alcoholism and Drug Abuse, and also Chairs Lenthal, Gottfried, and Rosenthal for inviting us to testify. My written testimony is going to be a lot longer. It would take a lot longer to read through. It's 12 pages. And it also includes a lot of detail from amazing colleagues of mine who are specialists in family practice and immigration practice and housing practice, and talks about the unique costs and consequences and intersection between marijuana and removal of children in family court and ACS. The written testimony talks about evictions in the housing context and also talks about deportations in the immigration context. But since my primary experience is in court every day in the criminal context, I'm going to focus on what the reality looks like there. So I've been a public defender now going on 6 years, and I've represented thousands of people, and hundreds of them have been charged with low-level marijuana possession. The numbers that we heard last year and the numbers that you've been hearing today, the 18,000 a year, 86% of which arrested are Black and Latino people from only certain neighborhoods, is shocking, but it doesn't come as a surprise to us public defenders. We see this reality day in and day out every day, and we see how the criminalization of marijuana drives broken windows policing, comes at enormous human and fiscal cost, and overwhelmingly really only targets the poor and people of color. And this is something shocking for me to realize in writing the testimony, preparing, but I cannot recall in all the hundreds of representations of marijuana arrests that I've been involved in ever having represented someone who was white charged with marijuana. My experience on the ground, our experience as public defenders, has really underscored the need for broad legislative overhaul for 2 reasons. Number one, we've seen that the promise of police reform and the promise of prosecutor reform just hasn't worked. There's a promise in Brooklyn by the DA's office that the majority of low-level marijuana prosecutions would end, and yet still in 2016 and 17, over 80% of arrests are being prosecuted. With regard to the promises by the mayor as well, still 18,000 people are being arrested. The vast majority, 85 to 86%, are people of color. Second, even if magically the police were to stop policing and the prosecutors were to stop prosecuting, the mere criminalization, the prohibition in and of itself, as our colleague who testified earlier mentioned, would still remain a valuable pretext for police officers to use to, again, continue to drive broken windows policing. One thing I just want to point out is the odor of marijuana really has become the new broken taillight. The new broken taillight, the new failure to turn, the new jaywalking. The odor of marijuana and the alleged the observation of marijuana has turned already pretextual stops into full-blown searches, already pretextual car stops into full-blown car searches. So for those 2 reasons, legalization from a legislative level, I believe, is the only way to go. Now, I want to talk about what court looks like, what it looks like in court. I meet my clients at an extraordinarily trying time, on the brink of crisis. Once I meet them charged with marijuana, they've already been stopped and frisked, cuffed, thrown in a police car, taken down to the precinct, fingerprinted. They've been held in squalid conditions for up to 24 hours, and they're terrified. I go back behind the courtroom, the pens behind the judge, and I meet someone who's terrified of losing their job, who's terrified of leaving someone in need of caretaking without caretakers, someone who's scared of losing their housing, if they're an immigrant, someone who's concerned about being on ICE's radar. And they tell me a complicated story about a bad stop and frisk. they're upset. They either deny that they actually had marijuana on them, or they talk about the fact that the approach, they just had hands rifled through their pockets, and that was the end of the story. They're then led out from behind the courtroom, chain gang style, handcuffed one to another with individuals who are charged with all manner of crimes and violations, assigned a barcode, retinas scanned, and then hauled before a judge, all for low-level possession of marijuana. You look at the bench where the folks line up before they're taken out to stand in front of a judge, and it's stark. It's all black and brown bodies. And I'll talk to the prosecutors and I'll say, where are all your friends? Where are all the white people? And the response is, what's the big deal? They're just going home. They're going to go home today. It's not a big deal, Scott. Like, relax. And I think this is an important point for a number of reasons. Once in court, once these arrests come to court, and these high numbers of arrests come to court, no one in court takes them seriously. No one seems to care. The only thing they seem to care about is getting these individuals who are charged with low-level marijuana out the door as soon as possible. The court officers are handing over to defense attorneys the files as soon as they possibly can, make this a high priority. They've been in for 24 hours. The prosecutors are quickly offering pleas that will allow them, or pleas or dispositions that will allow them to leave court that very day. The judges are asking our defense attorneys to hurry up and get these cases going. And that begs the question, if marijuana arrests are treated as valueless, time wasters, court cloggers by the people in court, why are we allowing them to enter in the first place, especially given what we know about the costs? I briefly want to talk about the impact of these dispositions, and I only can speak from my experience in Brooklyn in terms of the common dispositions, but with marijuana cases, the vast majority, again, resolve without any jail time and with them walking out the door. They're either given an adjournment and contemplation of dismissal, stay out of trouble for 6 months to a year, and your case automatically gets dismissed. They're offered the opportunity to plead to a lesser non-criminal violation and time already served, or worst case scenario, a misdemeanor and time already served. With an ACD, or an adjournment and contemplation of dismissal, however, the case stays open for either 6 months to a year, and during that time, good luck finding housing, good luck finding a job. If you're an immigrant, you're terrified that you're going to end up on ICE's radar. If for a violation, yes, it's not a crime, but it comes with an automatic surcharge of $120. If you don't pay that surcharge, a warrant issues for your arrest, and you face 15 days in jail and further arrest. The other option for surcharges, unfortunately, under New York law, is just entering civil judgment. That means that you can waive the surcharge, the automatic surcharge, but it acts as a lien against your credit for 7 years. So for the simple possession of marijuana, not only do you go through this experience of arrest, quick prosecution, you're released, your credit is hurt for 7 years. So if you claw your way out of poverty 2 or 3 years from now and you want to get a loan, it's not going to happen. Then, of course, with the misdemeanor, you're saddled with a criminal conviction that can have all manner of consequences and a higher surcharge. Before turning it over to my colleague, I do want to make clear that the distinction between a desk appearance ticket and what we kind of consider, what most people kind of consider an arrest. There's this misconception that I've heard from clients, but I've also heard from not prosecutors, but also policymakers, that most marijuana arrests are not really arrests. You're given a ticket. And I want to disabuse the assembly and the panel members of that notion. A desk appearance ticket is actually an arrest. There's two primary possibilities when you're approached by the police for marijuana. You either get a summons ticket, and that's if you're charged solely with a violation marijuana, or you're arrested. Then the choice and the discretion belongs to the NYPD whether they release you with a ticket 6 to 12 hours later after you've been brought to the precinct, cuffed, put in the back of a police car, and already put on ICE's radar, only to be forced to come back 2 to 3 weeks later. It's a sitting duck for ICE, and we've seen this a lot of times with clients actually getting arrested on their desk appearance ticket date 2 to 3 weeks later because their name is published on the web, and ICE is simply waiting outside the court for them. Or the other option is to actually cycle them through the process. So a desk appearance ticket is definitely an arrest. The question is whether you're released after 6 to 12 hours from the precinct on the discretion of the NYPD or brought through the system. Under either circumstance, an arrest is obviously an enormously traumatic experience, and given what we know about the lack of benefits for criminalization, the costs far outweigh them. Thank you.